Hello, everybody. This is Morten from INKISH. I have a very, very big honor today to talk to my good friend Marg from an organization in Canada called DIA, which I'm sure she will tell us a little bit about. But I had the pleasure of speaking at Graphics Canada at a DIA and Swiss Q Print sponsored breakfast session, and that was, for me, was a lot of fun. So, Marg, welcome here on INKISH.
Thank you very much, Morten. It's great to be here, and thank you also for your participation at our event at Graphics Canada. It was awesome. People really enjoyed it, and it was great to have a global perspective on the current chaos in the world right now from different angles.
Thank you very much. Before we're going to talk about the topic, and I will introduce that in a second, let's just place DIA. Tell us a little bit what it is and what is it you do. Because I'm actually, when I see your program, I am astonished about how much you do, even though you are a relatively small organization, right?
We have right now we have 60 member companies. Now the companies range in staff anywhere from 10,000 to 3, so people. And but what we are is our key functions are education and networking. So we were able to, because we're small, and we've been around for almost 40 years now, but when COVID hit and a lot of associations kind of just dissolved or stopped functioning during COVID because they were so reliant on people attending events, we pivoted and went to Zoom within, COVID really, lockdown came in March, and our April meeting was a Zoom meeting, and we just kept on going from there. But our focus is education. It's to help. The majority of our members are printing companies or vendors to suppliers to printing companies, as well as some education, some consultants, anybody who can help printers. And that's what our goal is to help them build their business, stay current in technologies, get some unbiased input into technology, because, if you believe every ad, then you buy everything, and then you won't be a business anymore. So that's really what we're about. We're the majority of our membership is focused actually in the Toronto area, but we also have members across Canada, from West Coast in Vancouver to East Coast in New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. We also have some members in the States and the United States, and we have some members in the EU. So our goal is to expand globally.
Oh, great to hear. I would say that one of the things that I was sold on when I saw your program that was printed out at Graphics Canada was that it's every month, more or less every month, you have a let's say a walk-in educational sessions that is also later on broadcasted on the internet, right? So basically, even though that not all people can attend physically, there's a good learning experience from having people. And you had like a wonderful session about AI. The first time we met each other was about Drupal, long before Drupal actually took place, where you also had people from Drupal attending. I mean, you have a very, very wide program, and I was also positively surprised because it seems that you have a good backup from some of the vendors that is operating in Canada, which I guess is always important in order to be able to facilitate all the things you do, right?
Absolutely. We're so fortunate to have sponsors that are our vendors, and they're very supportive of us and supportive of the printing industry in Canada. Makes a huge difference. So we do 6 educational meetings plus 2 social events a year. And then as well, we capsulate the education meetings in what we call a knowledge resource synopsis, which goes out to everybody who was at the event, goes out to all of our members. And we post it on our website, and then the session is also recorded and posted on our YouTube posting. So we do everything that we can think of to get it out there to our members and to the rest of the printing industry.
Fantastic. I will say to everybody watching this, wherever you are in the world, go to the website of DIA, Digital Imaging Association, and see for yourself what they offer. And I think the cost of being a member is so inexpensive that I would recommend everybody to sign up for it. Honestly, so even if more vendors, they can probably be very helpful as well. So that said, Mark, I reach out to you because it's always, it's kind of funny because we the printing industry exists because of freedom of speech. But the freedom of speech is under an enormous pressure from many different sides. I think it's kind of strange to think of that with the internet, where literally all information in the world is accessible. It seems that we are getting dumber and dumber, and that we take unscientific sources more serious than sometimes very serious worked out things. And in particular, with the current president of the US, that was so generous to introduce the term fake news, even when for some of the very established companies that run very high journalistic integrity. And that was why I wanted to both talk to you and other people about, not so much about the freedom of speech, but how that influences the printing industry and how it influences. I mean, you are a Canadian. You have, I assume, friends, maybe even family, business with the United States. What does it do to you? Let's start on a personal level. What does it do to you when close allies and close friends like this changes so radically in such a short time?
Uh, it's something that's still evolving, so it's hard to put a finger on exactly the effect. I live in an area in Eastern Canada that's very dependent on tourism, and
Mm,
I'm where I live. I'm about 40 minutes from the U.S. border, and
mm,
it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out because a lot of Americans own real estate in this area. Um, I know locally, cross-border shopping is just a way of life. There's a large grocery store in the U.S. closer to my house than the large grocery store in St. John, New Brunswick. So,
mm,
uh, but what I am noticing for sure is huge drop in cross-border from the Canadian perspective.
mm,
The there's a lot of horror stories. And again, maybe thanks to the person who invented fake news, um, the, um, the fear of getting across the border and not being able to get back. And
mm,
just, you know, they're, they detain people with no access to legal counsel. So,
mm.
which is a core issue. So,
Yeah. So
but
what you're talking about here is that, because I mean, the news here is, for example, that the drop in American tourism is extreme. I think it's as much as 40%, or between 20 and 40% drop, but 40% of Canadians not going to the US on vacation.
yeah.
So when you talk about that cross-border shop, is that Canadians that are afraid of going to the US side because they're afraid not getting back to Canada, or is it the other way around?
No, at this point, the Americans are still, their dollar is still stronger than ours right now, and
Mm,
so for them, shopping on our side of the border is attractive to them. I think
mm,
for Canadians, the fear is not being able to get back, and
mm,
you know, I mean, there's a lot of reasons to be thankful to live in Canada. Freedom of
mm.
speech is one of them.
Yeah. I mean, we can have this conversation without. I mean, people can be upset and they can judge us for what we say, but that is fair and square, right? I mean, I think that as we spoke about before we turned on the recording, a very essential part of democracy is that we can talk and express what we believe, and then everybody who disagree, they are allowed to say what they think, and that's how we develop as human beings. Because maybe there's a little bit, oh, that was not that was not entirely wrong. Let me learn from that, or what you and I say is maybe not entirely wrong, and they can learn a little bit from that. I think that's how our societies have developed, and I think it has been a fundamental part of our democracy and how we developed as nations, right? And that is why I'm asking, because I mean, this fear of cross-bordering among neighbors that are so interconnected in business, in culture, in language, in so many things. I think it must be. I'm not trying to put words in the mouth of you, but that must be quite strange to see that roll out in front of you.
It is. It really is. And the greatest fear, because of the threats that are also emanating from the current administration in the U.S., people are really getting edgy about the threats. I
Mm,
mean, when people start talking about annexing another country, um,
mm.
as you well know, in Denmark,
Yeah, yeah, of course.
it's not well received.
No. But I would say there is one advantage if you become the 51st state, Mark. You never even thought about this. You would be the largest state.
That's why our suggestion is they become the 11th province, but I don't think we need the headache.
No, that's true. Well, of course, so that is like the one side is the personal thing, because both your own experiences, and you probably have friends that are maybe even more influenced by the changes that you see in America right now. When it comes to businesses, I mean, what I think is interesting to see is that a country that is, I would say, two countries that are so dependent on each other. I think it's like 28% of your purchases is from the Americas, and I think it's 17 or 18% from the Americans are purchases from Canada. I mean, that large dependency on each other, and with the tariffs and how that is now rolled out, is uh, that is also causing fear for your job and for your private economies, right?
I think a lot of people are starting to realize what the ramifications are, and it has to do with the tariffs starting to settle in very quickly. I would say on January 21st, as soon as the the beginning of the plan was made clear, the people started reading labels on things that they were buying in the grocery store and checking to see where they were from. And now, when you go into our grocery stores, there's every shelf with a Canadian product on it has a Canadian flag stickered in front of it.
Mm,
And it's just really commonplace for that. But in preparation for our conversation, I did a little homework, and I discovered, much to my surprise, actually, that Canada actually has free trade agreements with 51 other countries in the world.
mm,
Now, the U.S. on January 20th was our biggest trading partner. But certainly what's going on is that everybody is in Canada is looking to source from other countries.
mm,
And I mean, there are tariffs on Chinese goods, but they're nowhere near what the U.S. situation is. And you know, I was just shopping for something in particular yesterday and started finding myself going, "Oh, that's made in Thailand. Yeah, that's a good thing." It's like it's anything, and the whole country is doing this.
mm,
So, when you get close to 40 million people making a herd rate turn here,
mm,
that's going to have its effect. And I
mm.
think a certain amount of it, I mean, certainly what we see is that citizens in the US don't understand how tariffs work. They think
No, no. Mm,
that the manufacturer is paying the tariff, not the importer. And
yeah.
we had a DIA board call last week, and we were just talking about what the ramifications are in the printing industry, because it's something we have to visit frequently right now, like daily.
Mm, mm, mm,
And the number of ships, apparently, between North America and China that are basically going in circles in the Pacific Ocean, because and an example somebody gave to me was someone who's in the business of selling lawn chairs or lawn furniture, and
mm,
this is the season in Canada, where in the US, And this person has $55 million worth of lawn furniture
Wow.
on a ship coming from China, and has just been told that he's got to pay 88 million in tariffs before
Whoa.
the ship's allowed to land. And he doesn't
Wow.
have $88 million. And he
Mm.
wouldn't have it until he sold his $55 million worth of goods.
Yeah.
So he has to default on the
Yeah.
payment of that $55 million worth of goods. So
Yeah.
the ship can't bring them in and unload. So
Yeah.
now they're just waiting for all of the inventory that's on the ship that can't be delivered in the port. And so that just leaves the ships out there unable to land and
Yeah.
unload. So, the ramifications on that and the number of ships that are no longer going to US ports that are coming to the Canadian ports instead. And our ports
Mm.
I mean, they're beyond booming. But the other thing that's going
Mm.
on is that all the trucking companies in the
Yeah.
US, which would normally pick those goods up and truck them, they're going bankrupt. And I mean,
Yeah.
daily, because they can't
Yeah.
pick up anything because it's not coming in. Where in Canada now, it's back to COVID where we can't get enough trucks. So, and
Mm.
of course, US operators need special licenses to operate in Canada. So,
Sure.
the
Yeah.
the fallout on this is just the waves go worldwide on it. So,
Mm.
and
And
I
I
think,
guess that when you experience these kind of things, which is like, this is not a game. I saw that the Secretary of Treasury was saying that it was that the tariffs is more like a gamification theory about putting pressure on negotiations. But this is not a game theory. This is rolling out in real people's lives, right? This is something that is influencing a lot of people. I want to turn to another thing that I was thinking of when I was also thinking about talking to you was like, I just want to tell one thing that both for you and the audience, in the supermarkets in Denmark, most of our supermarkets have electronic price signs on the shelves. Now they have put in a star on all of the goods that are European made. And I tell you, when I go shopping myself, I also, for the most, avoid American produced stuff. But what is more interesting is that you can have I took a photo of it because there was a full, let's say, display of Lay's chips, right, which is owned by Pepsi Cola, right? And even though they had lowered the price to a fraction of the normal price, nobody was taking it. So it is also become. I was just about to say that I have a lot of American friends that I love dearly, and I feel sorry that they are becoming part of something that they are maybe not directly guilty in or part of, right? But I was thinking that what happens right now, and I think I see that from both Canadians and from Europeans, and maybe elsewhere, Mexicans as well, by the way, is some kind of, we can do this without America. We have our nationality in a positive pride, and we find strength in believing that we don't want to be overruled by America. Is that, as I mean, so that is part of the positive story, right?
yeah, absolutely. Just in a conversation with some people the other day, and we agree that this damage is permanent.
Yeah,
So once we start sourcing alternatives, we're not going back. So,
yeah,
and I think that's the same. It's a global economy, and it's a global economy for a reason, that there's either better product or better pricing or better timing, whatever, that's making people source to alternatives. And I think a lot of Canadians are of the mind that we should have been doing this 50 years ago, but now we're
but that
forced.
is always, yeah, and but I would say that is always should have, could have,
Yeah,
would have, right? It is like it's like, when you I mean, that is like where you, I think, from your, I can tell you how I feel when I'm in Canada. I feel the first time I was there, um, I didn't immediately feel a big difference between Canada and the US, because when you land and you drive on the highways in Canada and you see the shopping malls and you see some of the grocery stores and something, there's a lot of things that are very much in common. But when you start to talk to people, you realize that I think that gun laws is something that changes the relation between people a lot, because people are not, I'm not afraid when I walk in Toronto street, to be honest, right? I also think that the heritage between you're still a Commonwealth member, and so the relation between Europe and Canada is that let's say that history together is also still very strong. So when you get into Canada and start to get to know people, you see there is a huge difference between. I mean, you talk similar language. I don't think I can hear all the nuances and differences, but you can, of course, right? But that is like something that is interesting for people that may have not been in either country. It's just, it is not the same, right? It's actually two very different countries in
Very
many ways,
different.
right?
Yeah, yeah. There's
Mm.
huge core cultural differences, and probably the greatest thing is that Canada, as a nation, celebrates individual cultures. We're not a melting pot, and the U.S. is,
Yeah,
you know, a melting pot, in that,
yeah,
it subjugates other cultures, where in Canada they're celebrated. And as an example, one of the provincial governments, I did some consulting work for them, and they have a provincially funded car insurance business. So you don't buy your car insurance privately, you go through the government. They produce all of their documentation in 62 languages. Like,
62.
yeah, and that's
Amazing, right?
that's a
Yeah.
province of a couple of million people, and it's 62 languages. It's
Mm. And
really different.
I was before your general election just a few weeks ago. I was watching a debate between the four major parties for prime minister, and it was also interesting because, and I think that maybe also answers a little bit why you have that openness to 62 different languages. Is that when you are a country that by default has two, let's say, major official languages, both the English and the French, it would be very odd if you accept two languages, why you should not accept three or five or maybe even 62 languages, right?
Yeah,
Because it becomes a part of your identity, is that you can't belong to smaller tribes, basically, right? Also, you have the Native Americans, or what do you call them in Canada? Native? What do you call them? Natives?
and
What do you call them?
indigenous.
Indigenous. Okay, okay,
Yeah,
okay. Because I mean, I don't know how big that part of the population is, but it's something that is really taken into consideration politically, because there's like, if you want to build a highway, or if you want to drill oil or other natural resources, you really have to take those things into considerations, right?
absolutely. Yeah, and they represent about a million
Mm.
people in our population. The
A
indigenous
million people.
persons.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Is that across the entire Canada, or is it mainly in the east, or is it
It's
across?
across the country, and in particular the far north. So,
Okay, okay. Fantastic. Um, when you look at the new government, it was I think that is a year ago. It didn't look like the Liberals would win the Canadian election, and now Mark Carney, he was even recognized by Trump yesterday as being a, a runner-up, almost on the same pace as Trump. He even said, and I think it's kind of interesting, because what does it? Because he is. Without being political, but he seems that he has gained a lot of respect in Canada for also standing up against Trump and the tariffs, and also seems to have ideas just by having the intertrade between the provinces made into more like one country, and you can save a lot of money in doing that. Is that something, when you talk to your friends and your peers, or is that something that people talk about and understand that that scope?
Very much so. And people are Canadians. Well, I mean, Canadians love a minority government, which is
Yeah.
unique to a constitutional monarchy, and that we can have a situation where the party that wins the most seats doesn't necessarily control the government because there's enough other parties that the sway can happen. And what it does is it gives us more balanced government. And we Canadians really like that. They
Mm.
rarely give solid vote to a full majority government. They've got to be really fed up with the last government. And that was the situation. And the fact that the former prime minister stepped down and Carney was basically, won the first ballot on the leadership convention. And then with that, he wasn't a politician. And we're all pretty fed up with politicians right now. And he has,
Aren't we all?
yeah, exactly. And he's got solid business savvy. He had an excellent record when he ran the Bank of Canada. He had an excellent record when he was involved in helping the UK come out of Brexit. I have good friends from the UK who just think the sun rises and sets on Carney and wish he'd run over there because he did such a great job of saving the UK. So, he's got a lot of respect, really on a global basis for his financial knowledge. And I suspect that may be why he was treated with respect in his meeting yesterday, as opposed to the previous leader who was not.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But to
Perfect.
reiterate what both of them said, the notion of us becoming a 51st state, not a snowball's chance in hell. A favorite Canadian
True
expression.
and good. Yeah, fantastic. A few more things that I'm curious about. I think that what I like about this conversation is that this is, for me, it's like a learning experience talking to you because you are Canadian, and for me, it's like, okay, I learn about these things and try to put them in perspective. We are getting in the two questions, we're getting back to the printing industry, but I was thinking, I saw there were some American celebrities that moved to Canada as statements to the government in the US. But I read something that was actually, I wouldn't say interesting because it's also scary in a way, but there is this month in Ireland, 4,300 Americans were seeking Irish passports. 1,700 in the UK, and a rising number of Americans wanting to move to Europe, and they use the government as one of the excuses for doing that. And now the European countries are closing for Americans because basically it's a matter of absorbing, and there's also, unfortunately, I think there are people that think that, okay, keep the problems in America and don't export them to Europe. How is it? Is it easy to get a citizenship for an American in Canada, or do you see also regular people moving, or is that not like in Europe?
Very
Or you
much
don't know
so.
it, or yeah.
Very much so. They're wanting to move here. Ironically, one of the first things that was brought in on January 20th when Trump became president was he felt that there needed to be stronger border because we have, up until that point, the longest unguarded border in the world. And he wanted that shut down. Well, the irony, because he said that people were trying to get into the US, the irony of all this is that everybody who's been caught has been caught coming north. They weren't southbound. And we're all going, what? What do you mean go there? No. But it's not as easy as Americans think to come into Canada. And certainly during COVID, I know of one particular case of a couple who thought that they would just move to Canada. And they got to the border and they said, well, no, you can't. And it took them 2 years. And she had a job lined up over here, a fairly high ranking job, but it was like, No. And Canada has since put, the former prime minister was very big on immigration, to the point where housing has now become an issue because we don't have the housing to support all the immigrants. So, and let me add one caveat here. My last name is Macleod. My family history is clearly immigrant. Red hair, freckles, got to be Scotland. And, so not that I would
Also
in
1
any
year
way,
at least.
not that I would in any way be opposed, but it has to be measured. It has to be controlled. You've got to make sure that there's somewhere for people to live and somewhere for them to work and whatnot. So the lid has gone on onto immigration, and there's a definite cap on it. So much as they would like to leave, mind you, if I were Greenland, I'd put a solid cap on it. But yeah. But yeah, I think that they're
True.
not as getting out of the U.S. is not as easy as they would like to think.
Last question here. All the things we have talked about obviously influence the people, the businesses, the relationship with the world, essentially everything that defines us as countries and nations. What is your view on how does it influence the printing industry in Canada?
I think the unfortunate part right now is just the sheer chaos of the message that's coming out of the U.S. government. So everything has become unpredictable. We've got supply chain issues. Printers in Canada are being cautious. Customers of printers in Canada are being cautious. They're not sure if their goods are going to get across the border okay. It's one thing if it's just printed materials, books or whatnot, because it has always been, with all the free trade agreements we've had with the U.S., printing has always been exempt. Whether that's going to stay that way, we don't know. But what about packaging? And not so much the package itself, but the contents of the package. If that gets hit with tariffs, then that's going to have a snowball effect to the packaging converters. So, and just plastic substrates. Most plastic that is used in printing in Canada comes in from the U.S. So there's a retaliatory tariff on that. There's retaliatory tariffs on machine parts. I think I mentioned consumables already, but the list is pretty extensive on more on retaliatory tariffs or an upcharge because the goods have funneled from another country into the U.S. to Canada. And that's one of the reasons why our ports have become so busy, is that the shipping companies now don't want to go to the U.S. ports because of what I talked about earlier with them being refused because they don't want to pay the tariff. So now what you've got is just they're trying to get into Canada, but suddenly we've got, instead of 10 people at the door, we've got 1,000 people at the door, and we need to have ways to handle it. And so it's been 107 days of chaos, and and everybody's still trying to pivot and figure out how they can react to it. And at this point, Canadians by nature are cautious people, so everybody's just kind of taking it slow, finding alternatives. And that takes time. And as well, who knows which way the wind's going to blow tomorrow or later today.
Precisely. Or later today. Well, Marg, thank you very much for sharing your views and insights of being a Canadian living in these strange times. I think that regardless of your political views, I think it's important to have the conversation. And I say this because part of what we want to do at INKISH is also talking to people that may have a different opinion than Marg, And that is the beauty of democracy. Remember that we are all allowed to have different opinions, and that fortunately, and I hope it will educate all of us to be as open-minded to different beliefs as possible. Because I think instead of making wars and becoming unfriendly with each other, this is how we can develop things into something that is hopefully much better for people that live everywhere in the world. So again, warm thank you, Mark, and I look forward to see you online or in person the next time we have the opportunity. So thank you for being here on INKISH.
Thank you so much, Morten. It's been a treat.